The lights on Drifthaven failed one row at a time, and the small alien girl named Seth counted them as they went, because counting was the only thing left that still answered her. Drifthaven was not a great station. It had never been a great station. It was a ring of welded freight hulls bolted together at the edge of the Wesser Deep, 10,000 light-years from the nearest world that would still take its calls. 22,000 people lived inside it. Most of them had run there from somewhere worse. Seth was 9 years old, with gray skin and 4 narrow fingers on each hand, and she had been born in the dark of the outer ring, and she had never once seen a star up close. She watched the lights die because her mother had taught her to watch things. Her mother kept the air recyclers in the lower deck, and her mother said you could not fix a thing you did not look at, so Seth looked. She had counted 41 lamps go dark in the long corridor outside the shelter, and now the 42nd flickered, browned, and quit. 42. The cold came in behind the dark. It always did. The station could not hold its heat anymore. The reactors were down to 1, and that one was old, and the people who knew how to mend it had stopped saying it could be mended. The lower decks had already gone below freezing. Frost had crept up the inside of the corridor walls in pale feathers, and the water lines had begun to seize, and the medic on the 3rd deck had quietly moved the 2 oldest patients up to the warm core, where the last of the heat still gathered, because she did not have the heart to tell them why. Seth pulled her blanket tighter and pressed her back against the warm body of the old man beside her. His name was Korvesh. He had been a shipwright once, long ago, on a real world with real ground. Now he was just old, and his joints ached in the cold, and he told the children stories so they would not cry. He had 3 blankets and he gave 2 of them away every night, and every morning someone gave them back, and this was the only argument left on Drifthaven that anyone still had the strength to have. "Tell me the one about the lanterns," Seth said. "I have told you the lanterns 9 times, Korvesh said. But he told it again, because there was nothing else to do, and his voice in the dark was its own kind of lamp. It was a story about a long-ago people who hung lanterns in their windows for travelers who were lost, so that no one who came to their door in the night would have to find it alone. Seth did not know if it was a true story. She had decided long ago that it did not matter whether it was true. It only mattered that someone kept telling it. That had been the morning. Now it was the long middle of the day cycle, though there was no day here, only the clock, and the clock said it had been 6 days since the last supply runner failed to arrive. 6 days. The runner had been called the patient hand. It carried food and reactor cells, and a doctor who came twice a year. It was 4 days overdue, then 5, then 6, and on the 6th day, the station master stopped pretending and said the truth over the speakers. "The patient hand is not coming," the station master said. His name was Olu 10, and he was a tired man, and his voice shook. "We believe it was taken by the Wesar Deep. We have sent 11 distress calls in 9 days. We have received no reply. I will not lie to you. I have never lied to you. Conserve heat, conserve food, stay together." He did not say the rest. He did not have to. Everyone on Drifthaven knew what lived in the Wesar Deep, because the Wesar Deep was the reason the station hung at the edge of it and not inside it, and the reason no fleet would come this far out to help. They called it the Quell. No one had ever seen the Quell and lived to draw it. That was the first thing every child on Drifthaven learned. The Quell was not a fleet. It was not a beast with teeth. It was the dark itself learning to be hungry. It came out of the deep places between the stars, and where it passed, light stopped. Not blocked, stopped. A ship that met the Quell did not burn or break. Its lamps simply went out, and then its engines, and then its calls, and then the ship was gone, swallowed whole into a cold that did not give anything back. The Quell had eaten 9 worlds that the records still remembered. It had eaten more that the records had forgotten, because the records had gone dark too. There were old people on Drifthaven who would not say the name aloud. They had a gesture instead, a flat hand drawn slowly across the eyes, and it meant the thing that takes the light. And Seth had seen her own grandmother make that gesture once before she died, looking out at the deep, and Seth had never forgotten the way her grandmother's hand had shaken. The empires of the Bright Lanes had a single law about the Quell, and it was a short law. Do not approach the Wesar Deep. Whatever cries out from inside it is already lost. Drifthaven sat just outside the edge of that law, in the thin band of half-dark where the quell came and went, and that was why no help would come. To send a ship to Drifthaven was to send it past the edge of the law and into the place where light went to die. The Bright Empires were not cruel about it. They had simply done the arithmetic, long ago, and the arithmetic said that any ship sent to Drifthaven would be 2 ships lost instead of 1, and so the law stood, and the station hung at the edge of the dark, and the calls went out, and nothing answered. So, no ship would come. Everyone understood that. Even the children understood that. It was not a thing anyone raged about anymore. The rage had burned out years ago, in the older ones, and the younger ones had never been given any rage to begin with. There was only the cold, patient knowledge that Drifthaven was a place the galaxy had finished with, and that the only mercy left was to grow old slowly and to keep the children warm as long as the heat held. Seth understood it, but she still went to the high port every night cycle, where the great window of salvaged glass looked out into the Wessar Deep, and she still pressed her 4-fingered hand to the cold pane, and she still looked for a light. Her mother had taught her to look at things. She did not know what she was looking for. There were no stars out there. The deep was the one place in the whole turning sky where there were no stars at all, only a flatness so black it seemed to lean against the glass and push. Her mother was not at the high port anymore. Her mother had gone down into the lower deck 11 days ago to coax the last recycler back to life, and the recycler had come back, and her mother had not, because the cold down there had been too much for her chest. And now Seth looked out the window for 2 reasons instead of 1, and she did not tell anyone about the second reason, because the second reason was a kind of looking that a 9-year-old is not supposed to have to learn. On the night the 42nd lamp died, Seth went to the high port anyway. Corvesh came with her, because he did not like her walking the cold corridors alone, and because his joints hurt and walking was better than lying still. They went up through the failing ring, past the shut bulkheads and the families huddled 3 to a blanket, past the medic's deck where someone was singing very softly to keep the patients calm, and they came to the high port, and Seth pressed her hand to the glass. "There is nothing out there, little one," Corvesh said gently. "There has never been anything out there. That is the whole trouble with the Wessar Deep. It is the only empty thing in all of space." "I know," Seth said. "I just want to look." So they looked. And the deep looked back, flat and black and patient, the way it had every night of Seth's whole life. And then, very far away, in the place where there had never been a light came on. It was small. It was so small that Seth did not believe it. She blinked her wide, dark eyes, and waited for it to be a trick of her tired sight, the way the dead lamps sometimes left a ghost glow behind them. But it did not go away. It hung in the black where nothing hung, a single cold point, white as the inside of a flame. "Corvesh," she whispered, "there is a light." The old man leaned close to the glass. His breath fogged it. He wiped it away with a sleeve gone thin at the elbow, and he looked, and Seth watched his old face change. She watched a thing come into it that she had not seen there in all the long cold weeks. She did not have a word for it yet. Later she would learn the word. The word was hope, and she would spend the rest of her life trying to describe the exact shape it made on the face of a man who had given it up. "That is not a star," Corvesh said softly. "There are no stars in the deep." "Then what is it?" He did not answer. He could not answer, because the light was growing. It did not move closer the way a ship moved closer, sliding across the dark. It grew the way a thing grows when it is coming straight at you, out of nothing, out of the very place the quell came from. The single point swelled into a line, the line swelled into a shape, and the shape, against all the law and all the dark and all the dead hopes of 22,000 frightened people, was the shape of a hull. Out of the endless dark of the Wessar Deep, out of the one place in all of space where light went to die and never came back, a warship was taking shape. It was gray, it was long and low and scarred, built like a thing that had been hit many times and had decided each time to keep going. It came on without sound, the way all ships come on in the void, but it came on with light, and the light was the impossible part. The quell ate light. Everything that entered the deep went dark, and here was a ship sailing straight out of the heart of it, with every lamp burning, running lights down its long flank, a cold white beam sweeping ahead of its nose like a hand feeling its way through a dark room. Corvesh made a sound that was half a laugh and half something that had no name. He gripped the rail with both old hands. It came through, he breathed. Sweet dark, it came through the quell. Seth pressed both her hands to the glass now. The light of the impossible ship fell across her gray face, and for the first time in her whole life, she stood in a light that had come from outside, from the deep, from the place that only took and never gave. Behind them, in the corridor, the singing had stopped, and other people were coming up to the port, drawn by the brightness spilling down the dark hall, and they came slowly, and they came afraid, because nothing good had ever come from the direction of the deep, and they stood, and they stared, and not one of them said a word. On the long gray flank of the ship, picked out in lamps that did not flicker and did not fail, was a name. Seth could not read the human letters. She did not yet know what humans were. But Corvesh, who had built ships once on a world with real ground, leaned to the glass and read them slowly aloud. The way you read something you are afraid to believe. The name on the ship was Hold the Line, and it was coming for them. The whole station learned of the ship within the hour, because Seth ran the whole length of the failing ring shouting it, and a 9-year-old running and shouting in a place where nothing ever happened was a thing people followed. She ran past the medic's deck, and the medic came out. She ran past the shut bulkheads, and people opened them. She ran past the families 3 to a blanket, and they rose and came after her, slow at first, then faster, because there was a light in her voice that none of them had heard in a long time, and a thing that lives in the dark long enough will follow any light, even the light in a child's voice, even when it is afraid the light is a lie. By the time Oluten the station master reached the high port, 200 people were pressed against the glass, and more were coming up through the cold dark behind them. He pushed through, ready to be angry, ready to tell them all to go back to their blankets and stop wasting the heat their own bodies made. Then he saw the light out in the deep, and the words died in his tired throat. "That is not possible," he said. "You keep saying that," said Corvesh, who had not left the rail. "And it keeps not caring." The ship had crossed half the distance now. It was close enough that Oluten could see it was no runner and no freighter. It was a warship. He had seen warships only twice in his life, both times in pictures, both times belonging to the great empires of the bright lanes, sleek and proud and far away. This one was nothing like those pictures. This one was scarred down its whole length, plating welded over plating, a hull that had been opened and closed again 100 times. It looked less like a weapon than like a promise that had been kept too many times to count, and meant to keep being kept. And it was still burning every light it had, sailing out of the quell as if the quell were nothing, as if the cold dark that had eaten 9 worlds were only a long dark hallway, and the ship were a person walking down it with a lamp, in no particular hurry, certain of the door at the end. The station's old speakers crackled. Everyone flinched. The speakers had carried only bad news for 6 days. A voice came through. It was not a voice anyone on Drifthaven knew. It spoke their trade tongue badly, with a flat, strange accent, the words bent in the wrong places. But it was warm, and it was calm, and it was close. "Drifthaven, Drifthaven, this is the cruiser Hold the Line, answering your distress call. We have your beacon. We have you. Hold on, we are coming in." The high port went utterly silent. 22,000 people did not all hear it at once, but the ones at the glass did. And Seth heard it, pressed between Corvesh and the cold pain, and she felt the old man begin to shake, and she realized he was weeping, silently, the way old people weep when they have run out of the strength to make a sound. Oluten found the speaker panel with hands that did not want to work. He pressed the talk key. He had to try 3 times before his voice came. "Hold the line. This is Drifthaven Station Master Oluten. We hear you. We hear you. But you must turn back. You have come through the Wessar Deep. You do not understand what is in the deep. The quell is there. If you stay, it will take you the way it took everything else. Turn back while your lights still burn, please." There was a pause. Then the warm, flat voice answered, and there was something in it now that Oluten would think about for the rest of his life, because it was not fear, and it was not bravado, and he did not have a name for the third thing it was. "Station Master, we know what the quell is," the voice said. "We came in through it. We have been inside it for 11 days. That is why it took us so long to answer. Your call went out 9 days ago. We turned the moment we heard it. We are sorry we are late. Olu-10 could not speak. Inside it for 11 days. Nothing was inside the quell for 11 minutes. Nothing came out of it at all. The voice went on, gentler now. You have one reactor failing. You have heat for maybe 40 hours. You have food for less. We read all of it on our way in. We are not going to make you wait while you ration. So here is what is going to happen, Station Master. And I need you to listen, because we are going to do this fast. And then the ship told them what was going to happen, and it was the kind of thing that 22,000 frightened people had stopped letting themselves imagine, because imagining it had become a way of hurting yourself. The Hold the Line came in alongside Drifthaven, slow and exact, and turned its scarred gray flank to the station, and held there, a thing 4 times the length of the entire ring, blotting out the flat black of the deep, so that for the first time in living memory, there was something out the high port window, other than nothing. Seth stared up at it. From this close, she could see the welds and the patches and the long pale scars where the hull had been struck and had not broken. She could see open hangar mouths along the flank, lit from within, warm and yellow and full of motion. She could see, near the nose, a row of small marks painted in white, and she did not know what they were, and she would not learn until later that each white mark was a place the ship had reached in time, and that humans painted them on their hulls the way Corvesh's lantern people hung lights in their windows, so that everyone who looked at the ship would know it had a habit of arriving. Then small craft came out of those mouths, dozens of them. They crossed the gap between the warship and the station in seconds, and they were not weapons, they were boxes, blunt and ugly, and stuffed full, and they fastened themselves to Drifthaven's docking rings like a litter of young finding their mother. The first thing they brought was heat. It came through the docking seals as a great gust of warm, clean air, and it rolled down the cold, dead corridors of the failing ring, and people who had not been warm in 6 days stood in it and shook, and could not understand what was happening to their bodies. Children cried. Old ones laughed. Seth felt the warmth touch her gray face, and she turned to Corvesh, and the old shipwright was on his knees, not from weakness, but because his legs had simply stopped holding him up, and he was pressing his forehead to the warm deck, and saying a word over and over that Seth did not know, a word from a world she had never seen. The second thing they brought was food, real food, hot, in sealed trays that warmed themselves, more food than Drifthaven had seen at once in 2 years. Crews in gray suits moved through the corridors handing it out, and they were small and pink and tall and strange, with flat faces and round eyes, and they smiled too much, and they kept saying the same thing in their bent trade tongue. You are all right now. You are all right. We have you. These were humans. Seth had never seen one. No one on Drifthaven had. The empires of the Bright Lanes spoke of humans rarely and never warmly. Humans came from a far green world that had clawed its way up out of nothing in a single blink of galactic time, and they had a reputation, and the reputation was not that they were kind. The reputation was that they were stubborn past all sense, that they did not know when a thing was finished, that they would throw themselves at a closed door, until either the door or they gave way, and that it was usually the door. The great empires found them exhausting. The great empires kept them at arm's length. There were treaties whose entire purpose was to give the humans a polite reason to stay home, and the humans signed them, and then a distress call would come from somewhere no treaty covered, and the humans would go, and the great empires would shake their heads and call it a flaw. And one of their warships had just sailed out of the quell to bring heat and bread to a freight ring that the whole bright galaxy had written off as dead. The third thing they brought was a medic, and the medic went straight to the third deck where the 2 oldest patients lay, and within the hour, both of them were warm and breathing easy, and asking for more of the strange hot food, and the human medic sat with them and held their hands, and did not leave until they slept. Seth saw this happen, because she followed the medic, the way she had followed every new thing that day, and she watched a pink, soft stranger sit in the cold with 2 dying alien elders, and treat them as though their lives were the most important business in the whole turning galaxy, and something settled in Seth's chest that she would carry the rest of her days. Seth followed the medic for a while, and then she followed a different human, because there were so many of them now and each one was doing a different impossible thing. This one was young, with hair the color of rust, and a smear of grease on one cheek, and a name patch on the chest of the gray suit that Seth could not read. The human was down on the floor of the second deck with the main heat conduit open, both arms inside it to the elbow, talking to it in a low, steady stream that was not trade tongue, and was not, Seth thought, really meant for anyone but the conduit itself. She crouched a careful distance away and watched. After a while, the human noticed her, and grinned, and the grin was so wide and so unguarded that Seth nearly fled, because nothing on Drifthaven smiled like that. Nothing had a reason to. "You want to hold the light?" the human said, in trade tongue worse even than the captain's. The human held out a small bright hand lamp without waiting for an answer, and Seth took it, because she did not know how to refuse, and the human pointed her arm and the light into the open conduit. "There, right there. Don't move. You're crew now." Seth held the light. The human worked. Now and then the human asked her to tilt it, or to hold it steady, and Seth did, and it was the most important task she had ever been given, and her arm ached, and she did not lower it. When the conduit at last coughed and warmed, and began to push hot air down the dead deck, the human sat back on the floor, and let out a long breath, and looked at Seth with something like respect. "Couldn't have done it without you," the human said, which was not true, and Seth knew it was not true, and somehow that made it better, because no one had ever bothered to tell her a kind, untrue thing before. The human took back the lamp, looked at it, then pressed it into Seth's hands again. "Keep it. We've got more. A station this cold, everybody should have their own light." Then the human was up, and gone down the corridor toward the next dead thing, already talking to it, and Seth stood in the new warmth holding a human lamp, and she understood, in the way a child understands a thing long before they have words for it, that these strangers did not save you with one grand gesture and then leave. They saved you the way water wears stone, a small kindness at a time, every hand busy, no one waiting to be thanked, until somehow the whole cold world was warm, and no one could quite say when it had happened. Olu-10 found the human captain in the main lock, directing the flow of supplies with the easy certainty of someone who had done this before. The captain was a woman, not young, with gray threaded through dark hair and a long pale scar across one cheek, and she turned, when Olu-10 approached, and put out a hand in the human way. "Captain Mira Vasquez," she said, "hold the line. You must be Olu-10. You've got a good beacon, station master. We found you on the first try once we cleared the worst of the quell. That doesn't happen often out here." "Captain," Olu-10 said, and his voice failed, and he started again. "Captain, I do not understand. The Bright Empires would not come. We sent 11 calls. We received nothing. The law says no one comes past the edge of the deep. How are you here?" Captain Vasquez looked at him for a moment, and there was something old and tired and very steady in her round human eyes. "The Bright Empires got your calls too, station master," she said quietly. "All 11. We pulled the relay logs on our way in. Every major power inside 2,000 light-years logged your distress and filed it under the same heading. Do you want to know the heading?" Olu-10 did not want to know, but he nodded. "They filed it under unreachable," Vasquez said. "Not unimportant, not unworthy, unreachable. To them, a thing past the edge of the quell is the same as a thing already gone. They grieved you, in their way, and they moved on. They are not cruel, they are just certain. And being certain is a comfortable place to stand." She looked down the warm, crowded corridor, at the gray-skinned people clutching trays of food, at the children, at the old shipwright now standing again, with a tray pressed to his chest like something holy. "We don't file things under unreachable," Captain Vasquez said. "We never figured out how. It's a flaw, honestly. It costs us a great deal. But your call said 22,000 people. And it said failing reactor, and it said please, and there was a door between us and you, and the door was the quell." She shrugged, a small human motion. "So we opened the door." "You cannot open the quell," Olu-10 whispered. "No one opens the quell." "We've been opening it for 9 years, station master," Vasquez said. "You just never saw, because everyone who could see was too far inside it to send word back out." She turned back to her work. "Eat something. Warm up. Get your people warm. Then come to my ship. and I'll tell you why we're really this far out, and why the quell is going to be a very different problem in about 30 hours than it has been for the last 10,000 years. You make it sound as though you mean to fight it, Olu Ten said. Captain, with respect, you cannot fight the quell. It is not a thing that can be fought. It is the dark. You can only flee it, and grieve, and rout around. That is the whole wisdom of every people who have ever lived near the deep. That is the only wisdom there is. Captain Vasquez stopped, and she turned, and she looked at him for a long moment, and Olu Ten saw the edge come up under the steadiness again, the first hint of the thing the bright empires found so exhausting. That's the wisdom of every people who tried to flee it, she said. I'll grant you that. They were wise, and they fled, and they grieved, and they routed around, and the quell ate 9 worlds anyway, one tired surrender at a time, for 10,000 years. So forgive me, Station Master, but I'm not sure that wisdom has earned the name. We're going to try a different kind. She went back to feeding 22,000 strangers, and then she looked back at him one more time, and there was something almost gentle in it now. Tell your people not to be afraid of the dark tonight, she said. It's the last night they'll have to be. Olu Ten went back into the ring before he went to her ship, because he was a station master before he was anything else, and a station master walks his decks, and what he saw on those decks he would carry to the end of his life. He saw human crews and Drifthaven people working side by side already, as if they had always done it, no ceremony, no speeches. He saw the rust-haired one who had let Seth hold the light, now teaching 3 of the station's own engineers how to coax the failing reactor, not taking it from them, not doing it for them, but standing at their shoulders and saying, "Try that, no, the other way. Good, see, you had it." Until the reactor that had been dying for a year came up to a steady, warm hum, and the 3 alien engineers stared at their own hands, as if the hands had done something they had not known they could do. He saw a tall human in a stained apron in the station galley, where the cold ovens had not been lit in weeks, and the human had them roaring now, and was cooking, and a knot of station children had gathered at the door, drawn by a smell they had no name for, and the cook in the apron was handing out small, hot things, and laughing at the faces the children made, and Olu Ten realized the human had cooked far more than the crew could ever eat, on purpose, so that there would be enough to give away, so that for one night, the children of Drifthaven would know what it was to be offered more than they needed. He saw 2 of the human crew sitting with the oldest of the old, the ones who had lain down weeks ago, and quietly decided to stop, the ones the station could no longer warm, and could no longer feed, and had begun, in its heart, to grieve. The humans were not doing anything medical. They were just sitting, holding hands, listening. One of the old ones was telling a long story about a world that no longer existed, and the human was leaning in, asking questions, as if there were nothing in the whole galaxy more worth knowing than the name of a river on a planet the Quell had taken 80 years ago. And Olu Ten understood that this too was the work. That the humans had learned somewhere, at some terrible cost, that you do not only save a people by feeding their bodies, you save them by treating the smallest and oldest and most forgotten of them as though they matter, because a people that has stopped believing it matters will, in the end, lie down in the dark all on its own, and no reactor will warm that cold. He found his station changed in an hour, not because the humans had taken it over, but because they had handed it back. Every dead thing had a station hand and a human hand on it together. Every frightened person had been spoken to by name. The despair that had filled the ring for 6 days had not been ordered out. It had simply been crowded slowly to the edges by the sheer relentless busyness of people who had decided the situation was not finished and were behaving accordingly. Olu Ten had spent 6 days managing a death. He walked his decks now and found, to his bewilderment, that somewhere in the last hour it had quietly turned back into a life. Olu Ten stood in the warmth of his saved station and did not yet understand that the woman with the scar had just declared war on a hunger 10,000 years old, and had brought one scarred gray ship to do it with, and had not for one moment considered that this might not be enough. Out the high port, the hold-the-line held station against the black, every lamp burning, a single stubborn light in the one place in all the sky where light was never supposed to be. And far out in the Wessar Deep, in the flat cold heart of the Quell, something that had eaten 9 worlds and never once been answered, began, slowly, to notice that it had been found. The quell came back at the 3rd hour, and it came the way it always came, which was to say it did not come at all. It simply began to be there. The first sign was the stars going out. Not the stars of the deep, for there were none, but the thin scatter of distant lights at the edges of the high port window, the far galaxies and the dim suns of the bright lanes a long way off. One by one they browned and dimmed and were gone, the way the station's own lamps had gone, as if a hand were drawing a black sheet across the whole sky from the outside in. Seth saw it first, because Seth was still at the high port. She had not been able to sleep, not with food warm in her belly for the first time in weeks, and a human warship filling the window where nothing had ever been. She watched the far lights die, and she felt the cold come back into the glass under her hand, and she ran for Corvesh, and Corvesh limped to the speaker panel and called the lock, and within a minute, Captain Vasquez's voice was on the station speakers, calm and flat, and not at all surprised. All Drifthaven personnel, this is Captain Vasquez of the Hold the Line. The quell is approaching. You are not in danger. I am going to say that again, because you will not believe it. You are not in danger. Stay inside the ring. Stay away from the outer windows. Keep the children calm. My ship is between you and the dark, and my ship does not move. In the lower decks, the people of Drifthaven did the only thing they had ever known how to do when the quell came near. They huddled, and they went quiet, and they waited to be eaten. It was an old habit. It was the oldest habit they had. Some of them began to make the gesture, the flat hand, drawn slow across the eyes, the thing that takes the light, and the human crew who were still aboard handing out blankets, did not understand the gesture, but understood what it meant, and they went quietly through the decks, and turned every lamp they could find, as bright as it would go. But the high port did not empty. Seth would not leave it, and Corvesh would not leave Seth, and Olu-10 the station master came up too, because he had decided that if his people were going to die, he would watch it happen with open eyes, and if they were going to live, he wanted to see how. So the 3 of them stood at the great salvaged window and watched the quell arrive. It arrived as nothing. That was the horror of it, the thing the records could never quite hold. The deep had always been black, but it had been an honest black, an empty black, a black that was simply the absence of any light. The quell was a different black. It was a black that was present. It rolled in from the far edge of the deep like a tide of pure unlight, and it did not reflect the burning lamps of the human warship, did not glint, did not shine, gave back nothing at all. It came up against the white running lights of the Hold the Line, and the lights did not push it back, and it did not push the lights out. The 2 things met along a line, the burning gray hull and the rolling dark, and the line held. Olu-10 felt his old fear rise in him, the fear every child on Drifthaven was born already carrying, the fear that was older than he was, older than the station, the certainty that the dark always won in the end, because the dark was patient, and the living were not. He had spent his whole life being managed by that fear. He had built every decision around it. He had told himself it was wisdom. Standing at the glass now, with a human ship holding a line that no one in 10,000 years had ever held, he began to wonder, for the first time, whether it had ever been wisdom at all, or only fear that had learned to dress itself well. And then the quell spoke. It had never spoken before. The records held no word of the quell ever speaking, because nothing that heard it had ever returned to write it down. But it spoke now, and it spoke through the station's own dead systems, through the failed lamps and the cold recyclers and the silent speakers, all at once, in a voice that was not a voice, but the shape a voice would leave behind if you took the sound away and kept only the cold. Let go. That was all. 2 words, pressed into every dark surface of the station at once. Seth felt them in her teeth. Corvesh swayed and gripped the rail. Down in the lower decks, 22,000 people heard them too, in the dead lamps and the cold metal, and an old despair that the human food had not quite reached rose up again in their chests, because the quell did not threaten and it did not rage. It only asked you to do the thing you had already half decided to do. It only asked you to give up. Let go. All things end. I am only the ending. Come early. The bright ones know this. They did not come. They are wise. Let go, and it is painless. Hold on, and it is only longer. And here was the terrible thing. The thing that had eaten 9 worlds. It was not a lie. That was why it worked. Everything it said was true. All things did end. The bright ones had not come. Holding on was longer, and it was harder. The quell had never needed to lie. It had only ever needed to say the true thing in the cold hour, when a tired people had no strength left to argue with it, and across 10,000 years, no one ever had. And the quell did not speak only to the station as a whole. That was the other thing the records had never been able to hold, because the ones who learned it never came back. The quell reached down into each person alone, into the private cold place that every living thing keeps and tells no one about, and it found there the exact true thing that would unmake them, and it said only that. To Olu 10 it said, in a voice that sounded almost like his own, "You have been managing their deaths for years and calling it leadership, and you are tired, and you would like to put it down, and no one would blame you, and it is true. All of it is true." And Olu 10 felt his knees want to fold, because it was true, he was tired. He had been tired for so long. To Korvesh it said, "You are old, and you have outlived your world and your trade, and most of the people you loved, and a man who has built ships has nothing left to build, and the rest is only waiting, so why wait?" And the old shipwright's hands loosened on the rail. To Seth it said, "The smallest and cruelest thing," in a voice that was almost gentle, "Your mother went down into the dark and did not come back, and the dark is where she is, and if you let go, you will be where she is, and you will not have to look out this window alone anymore." And Seth, who was 9 years old and had been looking out that window alone for 11 days, felt the lamp in her hand and very nearly set it down. The station speakers crackled, and over the cold voice of a thing 10,000 years old, a human voice answered, warm and flat and entirely unbothered, the way a person answers a neighbor who has said something foolish. "No," said Captain Mira Vasquez. Seth stared at the speaker. The whole station stared at it. "You've had a good run," Vasquez went on. "Conversational, almost kind. 10,000 years, 9 worlds. I read the histories on the way in. You've never once been told no, have you? Everyone who met you was already tired, already cold, already halfway to letting go, and you just helped them along. You're not a hunger, you're a permission. You're the voice that tells people it's all right to stop, and for 10,000 years everybody you met agreed with you." She paused, and the quell, which could reach into anyone, reached into her. Seth did not hear what it said. No one did. But the channel was open, and there was a silence on it, a long silence. And in that silence, Seth understood that even the captain had a private cold place. Even the captain had a true thing that could unmake her, and the quell had found it, and was saying it now, quietly, just to her. When Vasquez spoke again, her voice was rougher and lower, and it was the most human thing Seth had heard all day, because it was not unafraid. It was afraid, and it went on anyway. And Seth learned in that moment that those were not opposites, that they had never been opposites, that the bright empires had been wrong about that too. "Yeah," Vasquez said quietly, "to the dark, to the true thing it had found. That one's real. You're good. 10,000 years of practice you ought to be. You found the thing I lie awake over, and you said it back to me in my own voice." She breathed out. "Here's what you don't understand, because nobody you ever met would tell you. The point was never that it isn't true. Half the things that hurt most are true. The point is that you can know a thing is true, and feel the whole weight of it, and still decide it doesn't get to make the call. My fear doesn't fly this ship. I do, and I've already decided where we're going." Her voice came back up, steady again, hard again. "We're going to your house." And up and down the corridors of her ship, Seth would later learn, the same thing was happening to every human aboard, the cold voice finding each one's truest wound and pressing on it, and not one of them set down what they were carrying. They had a way of speaking to each other on the open channel when the dark got into their heads, a thing they did instead of arguing with it. They said names. They said the names off the wall, out loud, one after another, the places they had been too late, and each name was a small refusal. Each name said, "We remember. We did not let go of you, and we will not let go of these." And the litany of the lost rolled through the burning ship like a hymn, and the Quell's whisper could not get a word in edgewise. The Quell pressed harder. The line along the warship's flank flickered. Out the high port, Seth saw the running lights of the hold the line dim, just slightly, as the rolling unlight leaned its whole ancient weight against them. You will tire. All things tire. Your lamps will fail as theirs failed. I have only to wait. I am very good at waiting. So am I, said Vasquez. But here's the difference between you and me, and it's the only difference that's ever mattered out here. Her voice hardened, and the edge that Oluten had glimpsed earlier came up under it, cold and bright and certain in a way that had nothing to do with comfort. You wait for people to give up. I came 11 days into the dark because somebody wouldn't. She let that sit. Then she went on, and now there was something in her voice that was almost tender, the way a person is tender with a thing they have begun to understand. You said the bright ones are wise because they didn't come. I want to tell you what I think wisdom is, because I've had 11 days in your dark to think about it. I think wisdom is the word frightened people use for the things they've decided not to try. The bright empires are very wise. They have a word for every place they won't go. Unreachable, hopeless, lost, past saving. They've got a whole vocabulary, and every word in it is just a polite way of saying we were afraid, and we left them. You taught them that vocabulary. You've been teaching the whole quadrant your one word for 10,000 years, and your one word is let go, and they wrote it into their law and they called it wisdom. Her voice dropped. We never learned the word. We're not wise. We're just here. And then Captain Vasquez did the thing that the bright empires, in all their wisdom, had never once thought to do. Because to the bright empires, the Quell was a law of nature, a region on a chart marked unreachable, a thing you grieved and routed around. She had stopped treating it as a place. She had started treating it as a fight. And humans, whatever else could be said of them, knew how to be in a fight. All hands, this is the captain, she said, and her voice changed register, no longer speaking to the dark, but to her own people, and she left the channel open to the station on purpose, so that 22,000 frightened souls could hear what hope sounded like when it had its sleeves rolled up. Light her up, everything we've got, full spectrum, every lamp, every beam, every emitter on the hull. I want this ship so bright that 10,000 years from now, the histories say the night the Quell met the humans was the first time in its life it had to close its eyes. What happened next, Seth would try to describe for the rest of her days, and she would never get it quite right, because there were no words on Drifthaven for it, and there were no words in the Bright Lanes for it either, because no one in the Bright Lanes had ever seen it. The hold the line caught fire. Not real fire, light. The scarred gray hull, 4 times the length of the entire station ring, came alight all at once from nose to stern, every lamp and beacon and flood lamp and searchlight blazing white, and then more than that, emitters Seth had not even seen folding open along the flanks and throwing out light in colors she had no names for. Light that should not have existed in the dark. Light poured out by a single stubborn ship, as if light were a weapon, as if light were ammunition, as if a crew of pink soft strangers had loaded their whole warship to the muzzle with the one thing the Quell could not stand, and had decided to fire all of it at once. The unlight recoiled. It was a small thing, at first. The rolling black drew back from the burning hull by a hand's width, then an arm's length, then more, peeling away from the savage white, the way a shadow peels from a struck match. The line that had held along the warship's flank began, slowly, impossibly, to move, outward, into the deep, into the Quell. Seth pressed her face to the glass. Down in the lower decks, the people who had begun to make the gesture stopped making it. Word went down the ring faster than any speaker could carry it, the way the worst news always traveled, and now, for once, the best. The dark is moving. The dark is going backward. The light is winning. 22,000 people who had spent their whole lives certain that the dark always won in the end, pressed toward the outer windows that the captain had told them to stay away from, because they could not help it, because they had to see it with their own eyes, the impossible thing, the thing no record held. And the cold voice in the dead lamps of Drifthaven, the voice that had eaten 9 worlds and never once been told no, made a sound it had never made in 10,000 years. It was very quiet. It was almost too quiet to hear. But Seth heard it, pressed against the glass with the white light of the human ship blazing across her gray upturned face, and she would know it anywhere for the rest of her life, because she had made it herself, many times, in the long, cold dark before the lights came, on the nights after her mother did not come back up from the lower deck. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Quell was afraid. Olu 10 was on the hold the line within the hour, because Captain Vasquez had sent for him, and because a man does not refuse the woman who is currently holding the dark off his entire world with her bare hull. A small craft carried him across the lit gap, and the warship grew in the window until it filled it, and he passed through a hangar mouth into a world he had no frame for. Drifthaven was cold welded freight. The inside of the hold the line was warm and loud and alive, full of running humans and humming machines, and a smell he did not know, and the bones of the ship thrummed under his feet with the steady force of engines that did not falter. Everywhere he looked, there was a thing being mended, even as it was being used. The humans did not seem to believe in finishing things. They only believed in keeping them going. He passed a corridor where 2 crew were welding a patch over a fresh scar, even as a third stood watch out the port, and none of them looked worried, and he understood slowly that this was simply how the ship lived, half broken and wholly working, all the time, on purpose. They brought him to the bridge, and Captain Vasquez was there, and so was a wall. The wall was the first thing Olu 10 truly understood about humans. It ran the whole back of the bridge, and it was covered, every span of it, in names. Thousands of names, carved and stenciled and scratched, in the human letters and in a dozen other scripts he half recognized. Names layered over names, the old ones worn smooth, the new ones sharp. "You're looking at the wall," Vasquez said. She did not turn from the dark beyond the forward window, where her ship's light still pressed the Quell slowly back into the deep. "Everyone does. Those are the places we were too late. Worlds, stations, ships, colonies. Everyone we got a call from and didn't reach in time." She was quiet a moment. "It's a long wall. We didn't get faster because we got good at saving people, Station Master. We got faster because we got tired of carving names." "Drifthaven is not on your wall," Olu 10 said. "No," said Vasquez, "and it isn't going to be." She turned then, and walked him to the forward window, and showed him the truth that the bright empires had never seen, because the bright empires had never been close enough, because the bright empires had drawn their charts from a safe distance, and marked the whole region unreachable and gone home. "You think the Quell is the deep?" she said. "Everyone out here does. You think the dark itself learned to be hungry. That's why you've never fought it. You can't fight a region of space. You can only flee it, and grieve, and route around." She pointed into the black. "But it isn't the deep, look." And Olu 10 looked, and where the warship's blazing light pushed the unlight back, far out at the retreating edge of the dark, he saw a shape. It was vast, and old, and slow. A single thing the size of a moon, ringed in dead and frozen hulls, hundreds of them, thousands, the ships and the world fragments it had swallowed across 10,000 years, all held cold and whole around it like a horde. The Quell was not the deep. The Quell was a thing that lived in the deep, one ancient single thing, and it had hidden inside the one dark in all the sky, where no one would ever come close enough to see that it was there at all. "It's a creature," Olu 10 breathed. "All this time, it is only a creature. It's old, and it's clever, and it's the loneliest thing in the galaxy, and it found out a long time ago that the easiest meal in the universe is a population that's already decided to die," Vasquez said. "It doesn't kill you. It convinces you. It spent 10,000 years in the one place where everybody who arrives is already half broken and far from help, and it has never, not once, met anyone who showed up rested and fed and stubborn with a hold full of light, until us." She almost smiled. "We're a very annoying species, Station Master. The bright empires will tell you so. It's the kindest thing anyone's ever said about us." Olu 10 stared at the horde of frozen hulls, and a question rose in him that he was almost afraid to ask, because the answer might break what was left of his heart either way. "The 9 worlds," he said. "The histories say the Quell ate 9 worlds. If it does not kill, if it only holds, then the people of those worlds. Captain, are they?" "I don't know yet," Vasquez said honestly. "That's part of why we came. We've fought 3 of these things now, in 3 different dead corners nobody else would go to. The first one we killed, because we didn't understand it, and I've thought about that every day since, because when we finished it, everything it had taken died with it. The second one, we understood too late to save much. This is the third. And every time we learn the same lesson a little earlier. She looked at the horde. These things aren't hunters, they're hoarders. Something happened to them, a long time ago. Some loss so big it bent the whole shape of them. And now they take, and they never let one single thing go, because letting go is the thing they cannot survive. The cruelty isn't in the taking, it's in the keeping. Everything in that horde is whole, Station Master. Frozen, asleep, forgotten, but whole. And if we do this right, it stays whole. And if you do it wrong? Vasquez did not look away from him. That was the thing he respected most about her, in the end. She never once looked away from a hard thing. Then we add 9 worlds to the wall, she said, and we get faster. Olu-10 looked again at the wall of names, and at the crew moving across the bridge, unhurried, certain. And he asked the question that had been sitting in him since he first heard the warm, flat voice come out of the speakers. Why you? He said. I do not mean it unkindly, but the bright empires are older than you, and richer, and their fleets are greater, and their wisdom is deeper, and they sat in their bright lanes and grieved us, and stayed home. And you, who are new, who the whole galaxy says are too stubborn and too soft and too foolish to last, you came 11 days into a dark that eats worlds. Why is it always you? Vasquez was quiet a moment, watching the quell out the forward window. It isn't always us, she said. We lose more than we save. That wall isn't a victory list, Station Master. It's the opposite. But you're asking the wrong question. You're asking why the strong one stayed home, and the foolish one came. The answer is that they're the same thing. The empires got old and rich and wise, and somewhere in there they did the arithmetic, and learned that some places cost more than they're worth, and they built a word for those places, so they wouldn't have to feel it every time. Unreachable. It's a very expensive word. It looks like it saves you something. What it actually does is teach you, a little more each time you use it, that some people are an acceptable loss. And once a people has truly learned that lesson, all the way down, they never come for anybody again, because there's always a reason, there's always an arithmetic, there's always a darker dark just past this one. She turned to him. We never learned the word, that's all. We're not braver than they are. We're not better. We just never let ourselves get comfortable with the math. And so when the call comes, we don't have anywhere to file it except go. It costs us. It costs us constantly. But the day we learn that word is the day we stop being worth anything. And some old captain on this ship a long time ago decided we'd carve names on a wall forever before we'd ever learn it. So we do. Out in the deep, the quell shifted, and Vasquez's eyes went back to it, and the softness left her like a light switched off. It's deciding, she said. Watch. It's about to do the only thing it knows how to do, because it's never in its life had to learn a second thing. Get to a rail, Station Master. This is the part everyone remembers. Out in the deep, the quell stopped retreating. Olu-10 felt it before the instruments showed it. A change in the cold, a gathering. The thing in the dark had run as far as it meant to run. It had eaten 9 worlds. It had a horde of frozen hulls 10,000 years deep. It was old, and it was vast, and it was done being surprised, and now it did the thing it had done to 9 worlds, the thing that had always worked. Every light on Drifthaven died at once. Every light on the Hold the Line died with them. The dark came down total and absolute, and the cold voice filled all of it, no longer quiet, no longer afraid, vast now, pressing in from every side, and it spoke not to the captain but past her, to the 22,000, to the old and the tired and the children, reaching for the despair it had always been able to find. You see, the lamps fail. They always fail. Even hers. Let go. She cannot hold the dark. No one can hold the dark. Let go, and be at peace, as the 9 worlds let go. She is only one ship. She is only one light, and I am the whole of the deep. On the dead bridge of the Hold the Line, in the total dark, Olu-10's heart turned over in his chest. Because the voice was right. It was always right. That was its terrible power. and he felt the old certainty close over him like cold water, the certainty he had been born with, the certainty that the dark always won. Across the gap, on Drifthaven, 22,000 people felt the old despair rise to swallow them, and felt the warm human food and the warm human heat turn cold and far away, and felt the truth of it, that it was only one ship, only one light, and the dark was everything. Down in the lower decks, the gesture came back, 1,000 flat hands drawn slow across 1,000 pairs of eyes, the thing that takes the light, and some of the oldest ones lay down, because they had been waiting their whole lives to be allowed to stop, and the voice had finally come close enough to give them leave. And in that dark, Captain Mira Vasquez laughed. It was not a brave laugh, it was a real one, low and tired, and genuinely amused. The laugh of a woman who has just watched a card she was waiting for finally get played. "There it is," she said into the black, and her voice carried, because she made it carry, calm and warm and utterly without fear. "You had to do it, didn't you? You had to kill my lights. You can't help it. It's the only move you've got. It's the move that's worked for 10,000 years. She let the dark hang one beat longer. You just made the same mistake the last empire made when it met us. You assumed that a human ship without its lights is a human ship that's lost." She gave one order, and she gave it gently, almost fondly, the way you finish a sentence you've known the end of all along. "Open the hold, all of it, now." Olu 10 did not understand, and then the dark in front of the hold the line was not dark anymore. The humans had not been firing their lamps at the quell to push it back. That had been the bait. While the quell leaned its whole ancient self against the blazing hull, certain that the contest was lamps against dark, light against night, a thing it had won 10,000 times, the hold the line had been doing something else entirely. It had been opening, slow and quiet, every cargo door and launch bay, and hold along its scarred gray flanks, and it had been seeding the dark. For an hour, behind the glare that held the quell's whole attention, the warship had been pouring out into the deep, by the 1,000, by the 10,000, the only cargo a ship like this ever truly carried into a place like this. Drones, lamps, beacons, small, dumb, stubborn buoys, each no bigger than a child, each carrying one fierce white light and one simple instruction, and they had drifted out unseen on the far side of the warship's glare, out and around, behind the quell, into the horde, among the frozen hulls, into the cold, lonely heart of the deep itself. This was the thing humans were truly good at, the thing the bright empires never understood, because they never stayed close enough to learn it. Humans were not, in truth, the strongest fighters in the quadrant. Their ships were not the sleekest, their weapons were not the finest, their numbers were never the greatest. What humans were good at was the long, patient, unglamorous work that no one watched, the welding behind the glare, the second plan laid quietly, while the first plan held the eye, the refusal to fight the fight the enemy expected, when there was a slower, stranger, surer fight to be won instead. The quell thought it was in a contest of light against dark. It had never once considered that it was in a contest against people who had spent an hour, while it gloated, quietly walking lamps in through its back door. Olu 10 would learn, later, exactly how the humans had done it, because he asked, and because the rust-haired one explained it to him, with the open delight of someone describing a good trick. The buoys were not new. The humans had been building them for 9 years. Ever since the first of these dark things had taught them a lesson, they refused to learn twice. Each one was almost nothing. A power cell, a lamp, a small dumb mind with a single instruction, and no capacity for despair, because despair was the only weapon these creatures truly owned, and a thing with no mind could not be made to give up. The humans had filled a quarter of the warship's mass with them, and called it cargo, and the bright empires who inspected their manifests at the border had read cargo, lighting, 10,000 units, and waved them through, and never once asked why a warship would carry 10,000 lamps into a place where light went to die. The answer was the whole answer. The humans carried light into the dark, because that was the entire point of the humans. And the seeding itself had been the patient part, the unglamorous part, the part no one would ever make a song about. While the bridge crew fought the loud, bright fight that held the quell's whole ancient attention, a second crew in the dark holds had been doing the quiet work, walking the buoys out one at a time on cold thrusters that gave off no light and no heat, drifting them wide around the edge of the glare, where the quell was not looking, because the quell had never in 10,000 years had to look anywhere but at the thing in front of it that was afraid of it. The buoys went out dark, they went out silent. They drifted for an hour into the horde, into the frozen hulls, into the cold heart of the deep, and they waited, dark and patient and unafraid, doing the one thing humans had learned to do better than any species in the quadrant, which was to set a slow, quiet, certain thing in motion, and then trust it and wait. And when the quell killed the warship's lights, certain it had won, certain it was the whole of the dark, every one of those 10,000 lamps came on at once. The deep lit up from the inside. The quell had been the only dark in all the sky. Now it was surrounded, lit from behind, lit from within, lit from inside its own horde. 10,000 small, fierce human lights burning in the one place that had never held a single star, and the thing in the dark was caught in the open, exposed, vast and old and ringed in the frozen evidence of everything it had ever eaten, with nowhere left to be dark. It made the quiet sound again, and this time it did not stop. The quell tried, at the last, to run. There was nowhere to run. It had spent 10,000 years being the dark, and now the dark belonged to 10,000 small human lamps, and the thing that had never once been seen was being seen from every side at once. It lunged for the buoys, reaching out its rolling unlight to drink them down the way it had drunk 9 worlds, and the buoys did the one thing the quell had no answer for. They did not give up. They did not tire. They did not let go. They were not minds to be soothed toward the dark. They were dumb and stubborn and bright, and they had exactly one instruction, and they followed it. Burn. No matter what touches you, burn. The quell could not put them out. It leaned its whole ancient self against one lamp, and the lamp burned. It wrapped a frozen hull around another, and the lamp burned through the hull. It poured its hunger into the cold heart of the deep, and the lamps burned in the heart of the deep, and everywhere it turned, there was light it could not eat, light that did not negotiate, light shaped exactly like the species that did not know how to file a thing under unreachable. For 10,000 years the quell had won every contest, because it could outweight any living thing, and now it faced 10,000 things that were not alive in any way it could reach, that would never tire, that would never doubt, that would burn, until their cells went cold and not one instant sooner, and it understood, slowly, the way a thing that has never lost understands losing, that patience was no longer a weapon it owned alone. And on the bridge of the Hold the Line, Captain Vasquez gave her people back their own light, all at once, and the warship blazed up again from nose to stern, and the quell was caught between the ship's glare in front and the seated dark behind, and there was no dark left anywhere for an old, lonely thing to hide inside. You spent 10,000 years, Vasquez said into the open channel, and the whole station heard her, telling everyone you met that the only mercy was to let go. You believed it. I think you believed it most of all about yourself. You're the oldest, loneliest, most tired thing in this whole black corner of the sky, and somewhere down in the cold of you, you've been waiting just as long as the rest of them for someone to come tell you it's all right to stop. The cold voice in the lamps had gone small again. Smaller than Seth had ever heard it, almost a whisper, almost a child. I am so old. I am so tired. Let me go. I'm not going to make you let go, Vasquez said softly. That was always your word, not mine. I'm going to do something you've never once let anyone do for you in 10,000 years. I'm going to help you carry it. Oluten watched her, and he did not fully understand, and then he began to, and the understanding moved something in him that had been frozen since he was a child at a window, watching his own grandmother make the gesture for the thing that takes the light. Tell me what happened to you, Vasquez said to the dark, and it was not a demand, it was the gentlest thing Oluten had ever heard a person say to an enemy. A long time ago, the loss that made you like this. You weren't born a hunger. Nothing is. Something was taken from you, before there were any worlds for you to take, and you decided that the only way to never lose again was to never let go of anything. So you took, and you held, and you froze it all whole, and kept it close, and you called it saving, because the truth was too much to look at. The truth was that you were burying things alive because you could not bear to bury them dead. Her voice was very low now. I know that grief, old one. We carry a wall of it on this ship. The difference is, We learned that holding a name and holding a body are not the same thing. You can keep what you lost without freezing it in the dark forever. You can let the living go on living and still never, ever forget. The deep was silent for a long, long moment. The 10,000 lamps burned. The warship blazed. And out among the frozen hulls, something that had not moved in 10,000 years began, very slowly, to shift. "Let them go first," Vasquez said. "Not because I'm making you, because you want to, and you forgot a long time ago that you were allowed to want it. The 9 worlds, the ships, everything in the horde you froze instead of killed, because some part of you couldn't bear to lose one more thing. Let them wake, let them go home, and I promise you, on a wall of 3,000 names, not one of them will ever forget who held them safe in the dark, when no one else would even come looking." The deep was silent for a long, long moment. And then, out among the 10,000 burning lamps, the frozen hulls began to wake. They came alive one at a time, lights flickering on in long-dead cockpits, ice cracking off hulls that had hung cold for centuries, 1,000 years, longer. Ships the records had grieved and forgotten, fragments of the 9 worlds, the people of them held in a frozen sleep so deep they had never known they were taken, waking now into the light of 10,000 human lamps and one blazing gray warship, the horde of the loneliest thing in the galaxy, releasing its hold at last, letting go of everything it had been too afraid to lose, and finding, in the letting go, that the light did not eat it the way it had always eaten others. The light simply showed it where to go. The quell unmade itself slowly, and it did not scream, and it was not destroyed. It thinned. It spread out across the whole great deep, no longer a single hungry dark, but only the honest empty black it had been before it ever learned to be afraid. And the very last of it, the small tired core of it, drifted past the high port of Drifthaven, on its way out into the open sky. And as it passed, the dead lamps of the station flickered once, and in them, faint and final, it spoke its last words, and they were not let go. They were thank you. And then it was gone, and the Wesser Deep, for the first time in 10,000 years, was only dark, and the dark was only dark, and there was nothing in it that wanted anyone to give up. Seth stood at the high port and watched the rescued ships come in. There were so many of them. They drifted out of the unfrozen deep toward the lights of the Hold the Line like a city coming home, and the humans went out to meet every one, small craft swarming, warm air and bread, and voices saying, "You are all right now. You are all right. We have you." The same words they had said to Drifthaven, said now to people who had been let go of 1,000 years before Seth was born. Whole crews woke confused, and weeping in cockpits they had thought were their tombs. Children of the 9 worlds opened their eyes into a light they had no memory of, and found pink soft strangers waiting with food and blankets, and that same impossible patient kindness. And the strangers did not even pause to be thanked, only moved on to the next waking ship, and the next, because there were so many, and not one of them was going to be left in the dark. One of the first ships to come fully awake was a great curved vessel of pale stone and metal, a thing built in a style no living shipwright knew, and Corvesh, who knew more dead styles than any man alive, gripped the rail and said it could not be. It could not be. That ship was from Vor, the second world the Quell had taken, the world the song said had been lost 1,100 years ago. And out of that ancient ship, when the humans cut it open and went in with light and warm air, came people. Confused, frightened, weeping people, who had gone to sleep in a sky going dark 1,100 years ago, and woke now in a sky full of small, fierce lamps and pink soft strangers. They spoke an old form of the trade tongue, so old that Corvesh could only half follow it, but he followed enough. They were asking after their world. They were asking if anyone had come for them. They were asking the same question Seth asked every night at the window, the question every lost thing asks into the dark, and for 1,100 years, the answer had been silence, and now the answer, at last, was yes. The humans did not tell them at first how long it had been. Vasquez gave the order quietly, and Oluten heard it, and understood the mercy in it. "Let them be warm first," she said. "Let them eat. Let them feel that they are saved before they have to feel how long they were lost. There will be time for the hard part. There is always time for the hard part. Give them the warm part first." And so, the people of a world dead 1100 years were fed and warmed and held, and only when they were steady on their feet was it gently explained to them that the galaxy they had known was gone, and that the river, whose name an old man had been describing to a human in a Drifthaven sickbay an hour before, had not run in 1,000 years, and that they were, all of them, the last living memory of a place that existed, now only in songs. It broke them. Of course it broke them, and the humans were ready for that too, because the humans had a wall of 3,000 names, and knew exactly what it was to carry a thing that was gone, and they sat with the people of Aethelvor in their grief, the way they had sat with the dying old ones of Drifthaven, and they did not rush it, and they did not fix it, because some things cannot be fixed, and the kindest thing you can do is refuse to pretend otherwise. Corvesh stood beside Seth, the old shipwright, and he was weeping again, and this time he made the sound, the long, open, human loud sound, and he was not ashamed of it. 9 worlds, he said. I taught the children there were 9 worlds the quell ate, and I taught them the worlds were gone, because gone is what the quell makes, and they are not gone. They were only held in the dark, and one ship came and turned the lights on. He gripped the rail. I am an old man, Seth. I have built ships, and I have lost a world, and I have buried more people than I can count, and I learned long ago that the dark always wins in the end, and I taught that lesson too, the way the old ones taught it to me. I was wrong. All of us were wrong, the whole time, for 10,000 years. The dark does not always win. It only always won here, because no one stubborn enough ever came. Captain Vasquez brought the hold the line back alongside Drifthaven before she left, and she came aboard one last time, into the warm, crowded ring, and 22,000 gray-skinned people who had given up hope 6 days before stood in their corridors and did not know how to thank a thing like her, so they simply looked at her, all of them, in a silence that said more than thanks. Olu Ten walked at her side, and he asked her the question that had been turning in him since the bridge. You could have killed it, he said. It took 9 worlds. It took our supply runner. It would have taken us. You had it cornered and afraid, and you could have ended it, and no one in all the bright lanes would have called it anything but justice. Why did you let it live? Vasquez was quiet for a moment. Because killing it would have felt like winning, she said. And the thing about winning, Station Master, is that it's the most comfortable place to stand, just like being certain. It would have felt very good. And the 9 worlds would have died in the dark with it, because it was holding them, and a dead jailer doesn't open the door, it just falls down in front of it. She looked at him. We killed the first one. I told you that. I think about those people every single day. So now I do the harder thing, which is the thing that actually saves them. The galaxy is full of people who'll tell you the strong thing and the kind thing are different choices. They're usually the same choice. It just takes more nerve to see it. She found Seth in the crowd. Perhaps because Seth had been the one at the window. Perhaps because there is always a child at the window, in every story worth telling, and the humans had learned to look for them. She knelt down to Seth's height, the captain with the scar, and she spoke to her in careful trade tongue. You saw us first, Vasquez said. Your station master told me. You were at the glass when no one believed there'd be anything out there to see. There's never anything out there, Seth said. My mother taught me to look anyway. Where is your mother? Vasquez asked. I'd like to thank the person who taught you that. It's the most important thing anyone on this whole station knew how to do, and you're the only one who was still doing it. Seth did not say anything. She did not have to. The captain had a wall of 3,000 names. She knew the shape of that particular silence better than anyone alive. Vasquez was quiet for a moment, and then she did not say she was sorry, because she had learned long ago that sorry was a word that asked the grieving to do the work of comforting the comforter. Instead, she reached into her gray jacket and took out a small thing and pressed it into Seth's 4-fingered hand. It was a lamp, a small human hand lamp, scarred and dented and warm from her pocket, with one fierce white light. Your mother taught you right, she said. Keep looking, and keep one of these. Out here, on the edge of the dark, you carry your own light, and you don't let anybody talk you into setting it down. Not the dark, not the bright empires, not anybody who tells you a thing is unreachable. She closed Seth's small gray fingers around the lamp. Unreachable just means nobody's come yet. Will you come back? Seth asked. Drifthaven won't need us back, Vasquez said. We left you a working reactor, full stores, and a chart of the deep that nobody's ever had before, because nobody's ever crossed it and lived to draw it. The bright empires are going to have to take you off the unreachable list now, because the road to you is open, and there's nothing in it anymore but honest dark. You're going to be fine. You're going to be more than fine. You're going to be the station that the lost worlds remember, as the place the light came from. She stood. But you asked the right question, little one, so I'll answer it honestly. No, I won't come back here. There's always another call. Somewhere out past the edge of somebody's law, there's always one more place everybody's decided can't be reached. We'll hear it. We always do. She almost smiled. It's a flaw. It costs us a great deal. We've never figured out how to fix it. Honestly, we've never tried. Then she went back to her scarred gray ship, and the Hold the Line turned its long burning flank toward the open sky and the wall of names that would not, this time, grow longer. The rescued worlds went their own ways behind it, waking, weeping, alive, the great slow procession of everything the dark had kept and the humans had given back. And the warship lit its engines and pulled away from Drifthaven, and it did not vanish into the deep this time, because the deep was only the deep now, and a ship could simply fly through it. It grew smaller and smaller against the black, until it was a single white point again, a single cold light in a place that had once held none, and then it crossed the far edge of the sky and was gone. Seth stood at the high port, long after the others had gone down to the warmth, holding her small scarred lamp, looking out at the Wessar deep. For the first time in her whole life, there were stars in it, faint and far and new, the distant suns of the bright lanes, no longer hidden behind a present dark. She pressed her free hand to the glass the way she always had, and she did not look for a ship, because the ship had come, and the ship had gone, and the ship had kept its promise. She looked at the dark itself, the honest empty dark, and she thought about the thing the captain had said, and she thought about her mother who had taught her to look, and she thought about the lantern story Corvesh had told her 9 times, the people who hung lights in their windows, so that no one who came in the night would have to find the door alone. She had thought it was only a story. Now she knew it was a kind of people, and she had met them, and they were real, and they did not file anyone under lost. She turned her small lamp on, and held it up to the great window, one fierce white light pressed against the endless black, the way a human would. Out there, somewhere, a ship was crossing the dark toward some other window, where some other child had given up looking. Seth could not reach them, but she could do the thing the lantern people did. She could keep her light burning in the window, so that the next ship through, whoever it came for, would know that someone here was awake, and looking, and unafraid. And the dark, which had eaten 9 worlds and been afraid for the first time in 10,000 years, and then been shown the way home by a single stubborn ship full of light, did not ask her to let go. It just let her shine.